18 months to change the world. The 18-month period that we are about to enter into could be one of the most transformative 18 months that we'll live through, or that we have lived through, because of a rare phenomenon, which is that all of the outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, will change signs within a compressed period just under 18 months. And so it's a big deal. I mean, we have to be prepared for some kind of major crossing or threshold, crossing of the river, you might say, you know, going down in the underworld and coming back out, kind of like a planetary retrograde, where I think the whole reality will be reborn anew. We're going to have a whole fresh new sense of the structures of reality at every level, potentially. Everything's in play with how powerful these transits are. Now, one point to note is that when planets change signs, particularly outer planets, most often they're going to enter the sign, retrograde back into the sign that they were in, re-enter the sign. Sometimes that process can take 3 or more ingresses. And so when I say we're in this 18 months of transition, this will be the date that Pluto enters for good Aquarius as the opening of the 18 months, and then the date that Uranus enters Gemini for good as the closing of this 18-month period. And those dates are specifically, Pluto will enter Aquarius on the 19th of November this fall, and it will never return to Capricorn. So that's going to kick off our, fully in the Pluto and Aquarius era. Neptune will enter Aries 26 January 2026, and it will never return to Pisces after that point. And then later that same year, in April on the 26th, Uranus will enter Gemini and never return to Taurus. And so by 26 April 2026, we have all of these outer planets squarely in their new realities and in their new worlds. So we've lived through a few of these in the 20th century, a few pockets where Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all change signs within a compressed period. And I want to walk through several of those just as chart examples and ephemeris examples of what this time we're entering into might look like. We can go to the beginning of the 20th century when Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all changed signs 1912, 1916, and 1914, so it was like a 4-year period. See, it's less compressed than what we're about to enter into. But that was a transformational period, particularly in Europe. The monarchical nature of European governance was greatly transformed. You had World War I obviously started during that time. The Federal Reserve in America was founded, a continuation of the central banking regimes that have been so important for contemporary or modern reality. You had the end of the Holy Roman Empire. The Ottoman Empire ended. Countries like Albania got independence during that time or near that time. A lot of people will mark that period as basically the end of the Age of Empires is what they call it. So that Age of Empires goes away, a big part of it being during that compression of these 4 good sign changes of these outer planets. Now, I want to make particular note that Pluto's final ingress into Cancer, the for good ingress, by late July and early August of that same year of 1914. So Pluto's for good ingress in May 1914, within the next 3 months, World War I begins, when you have the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and everybody declares war, kicking off World War I, coming just a mere 3 months after Pluto's ingress into a new sign, into Cancer. So let's go to the next chart example. This is the next time in our ephemeris where there was this compressed series of sign changes. And now we're in 1942, Uranus entering Gemini, Neptune entering Libra for good in August 43, and then Pluto entering Leo in June 39. And so you can see that period is, again, another 4-year period of these series of sign changes. And of course, what happens to the world? A whole new reality emerges after these sign changes, or maybe as a result of them, or as a manifestation of a symbolic movement in the sky. And I mean, I don't need to say much, but World War II completely transformed global governance. You have whole new realities of governments and banking and new systems of operation in terms of the interaction between nations. And so it kicks off Pax Americana, the World Bank, the IMF, all of the structures of global governance that we now live with. And keep in mind again, Pluto's final ingress into Leo, the for good ingress, was 14 June 39. And World War breaks out within 3 months. Again, we have this compressed period of a world war breaking out right after Pluto's final ingress. And I want to say this here, listen, I don't want world war. Okay, I don't want to have any kind of world war, but it's hard to deny that when you look at headlines, and the recent ones I've seen is that Poland's general says we have to be ready for war with Russia. I saw F-16 deliveries into Ukraine. I saw permission from Britain to go deep into Russia now. I mean, it's escalating every day, major escalations. I want it to go away, we all do. Stop the war, stop the murder now, to quote John Lennon. Do it now, stop the killing now, but it seems like it's escalating. And so part of why I want to make this video is to just understand what's happening is that we have these planetary compressed ingresses, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, that in the past have shown to be very triggering in the reality to reform the whole of the global architecture. And the news is confirming it. That's the whole thing. That's why I keep talking about this. It's not because I'm trying to bring it into reality, it's because reality is bringing it to us. And the astrology can help us process and understand. So let's skip on. When you get to the other periods like this in the 20th century, they're not as robustly transformative. And that might be some evidence that these periods don't have to be some kind of ground-shaking world war event. You come to the mid-1950s and you had within a 2-year period, Uranus entering Leo, Neptune entering Scorpio, and Pluto entering Virgo, all within a 2-year period. This is the one that's the most compressed, other than the one we're about to go through, which is even more compressed, the contemporary one. And what happens in 1956 to 1958? Well, I'm sure we can pull up the books and things and talk about big events, but you know, nothing quite on that scale happens, right? The only thing I can really think of is that, and this is how I'm thinking about the moment we're about to enter into, it's a before and an after. And the quality of reality will change dramatically. And I think in the 50s you have at least in America, the Eisenhower era conservative black and white media. And by the time you get into, you know, the late 50s and early 60s, things start becoming in full color. There's more media, there's more TVs everywhere. You really get to the age of the image. And culturally, we have things like rock and roll and the idea of the global star and all of the stuff that comes in the 60s. So maybe that was a threshold that we were pulled into. And mind you, each of these moments can be delineated with a bunch of techniques. So I know there's a lot more analyses that we can do for each of these periods. That's not this video. This video is simply the compression of time with all planets changing signs for good and trying to grapple with that technique. The next one is in the 70s. You had from 1970, Neptune entered Sag. And then the end of that cycle was Uranus entering Scorpio in 75. This was about a 4-year cycle or almost 5. And you know, mid to 70s, I know during that period Nixon resigns, the Vietnam War ends. So maybe there's something there that was like a Vietnam War era, and then we get into a more of a technological age. I think after this, you had the computers coming online. Apple computer starts somewhere around this time, I think 76, 77. The next one is in the 80s. So you have a compressed period from November 81, Uranus entering Sagittarius, Neptune entering Capricorn, November 84, and Pluto entering Scorpio in August 84. You know, 2 years and like a half. So another one of our compressed periods. And maybe this has to do with some of the goings on in Russia or the end of communism. Once we start getting into the mid to late 80s, things kind of are falling apart in a lot of the communist countries leading up to the fall of the Berlin Wall with Jupiter and Cancer in 89. And then you come to, just skipping ahead, the 95 version where you have Uranus entering Aquarius in 96, Neptune entering Aquarius in 98, and Pluto entering Sag in 95, a period of about 3 years of a compression, so not as compressed. I lived through this one, and I can tell you that in 1998, after Neptune entered Aquarius, there was definitely a sense of a new reality, particularly with the internet. So during this whole period, if you want to go back to that Uranus entry into Aquarius in 96, or even Pluto's entry into Sagittarius in 95, this was really when we started having things like AOL in America. You could dial into the internet, and I did a lot of chatting on something called AIM. It was an old app platform. By the time you get to 98 and into 99, we're really in the age of the internet. So films like The Matrix came out right after this period. I think this one I would mark from like the pre-internet days to the internet being full on and really taking over. I got a lot of news on the internet during this period and after. I mean, whole world shifted online with this version. And then you come to one we lived through most recently. This was November 2008. Pluto enters Capricorn, Neptune enters Pisces for good in 2012 February, and Uranus enters Aries in March 2011. And we all lived through this one. A lot of us will have more memories of this, but I mean, one of the stark memories is certainly the global financial crisis. changes everything. And then the phones come out. These things take over. And I remember I was one of the holdouts. I never got a cell phone because of how all-encompassing it was, how consuming it was of my attention to have one of these. I mean, these are like, you're gonna get addicted to this fast. And I remember it just took over my whole reality. But I finally got a cell phone, I think it was in 2012. And this is why I think 2012 was real. You know, the Terence McKenna predictions of time wave zero, the end of time, being pulled into the great attractor of the end of time, this idea. I do think it was the omnipresence of the cell phone technology. And by this time it's all over the world, growing, and everybody's got these apps and devices, and we're pretty much connected everywhere we go. That was the last threshold we went through. And mind you, Pluto's entry into Capricorn in November 2008, again, the for good ingress of Pluto was a global financial crisis. I think that one was a stark upheaval with a Pluto ingress. And so that's also something to note. Sometimes right as a planet ingresses into the new sign for good, another example was that Fukushima disaster, that Fukushima Daiichi earthquake that flooded that nuclear power plant in Japan. That happened the day before the ingress of Uranus into Aries for good. So these transition periods, right? You have a planet in an anaretic degree, it's unstable, and then it comes for good and it can really shake things up. We're about to enter a period, again, to remind us, 3 of these in less than an 18-month period that we are about to enter into starting in November 2024, which is why I've said I think 2025 is a year of a major trigger in all of reality. Now we hope it's more like these other examples I've just gone through in the 20th century that are calmer, but because it's so compressed and because of the specific nature of each of these transits, which I'm not going to cover in this video, we're all concerned, and because of the news escalating into global conflict. Another major point, look, with astrology, one of the best things it offers, let's say it offered nothing else to you but this one thing, which is awareness of timing of a thematic cycle. And that's all it offered us. It shows us when themes change and a list of dates. And those themes might be tough at times or might be good. That alone is an extremely powerful technology because it allows us to, one, process challenge as we're going through challenge. We can identify the thematic triggers in the transiting sky to process the challenges contemporaneous. So astrology as an awareness tool alone is an extremely powerful gift that it gives us. And that's why I want to make this video. Like, I don't know what's going to happen in this compressed 18-month period of transition. I don't know how crazy or new the world is going to get. I think it's going to be new in a lot of ways. And just knowing what I've laid out here with the ephemerides might give you a heads up or a leg up psychically to just rest in the transition phase, rest in the journey, you might say. I think awareness is such a powerful gift, and astrology provides a level of awareness that can help us process. You know, Uranus comes into Gemini. How can we use that for an envisionment of positivity? Well, we have new forms of communication, right? Flashes of brilliance, Prometheus delivering from the gods to humanity, new communication methods, global internet architecture as we get to communicate in real time to everybody even more than we already do. That's very exciting. Community building, collective community building, etc. Neptune and Aries, the ability to have a passionate initiation and the flame of assuredness and the fire of selfhood, and that gets brought into our spirituality, into our ways we think about reality. There's a certain sense of I know, and I can have this inflamed, impassioned approach to my spiritual work and to the collective spiritualism. It would be beautiful to have a revival of spirit, recognition of the interconnectedness of all beings in a really excited way. And then we have with Pluto entering Aquarius, right? Transformations around the collective structure. The lowest among us, the little guy and gal and person, can unite and overthrow the previously existing structures of power that might have been more inequitous. Pluto in Aquarius transforms equity in a way, and we have these new structures that can be implemented. You overthrow the old Saturn and you get a new Saturn, a new structure that's hopefully more egalitarian and more useful for the collective. And so that is the vision. I want us to keep articulating positivity during this period of great change because we have to do it. to bring about what we want to see brought about. All right, that's the video. Glad you're here, glad to be with you. You can always go to my website, sjanderson144.com, check out my reading schedule there. I'm also on Instagram now. I haven't really talked about that much. I've been posting there, enjoying that app for the last few months, and come follow me on Instagram. It's sjanderson233, the next Fibonacci number in the sequence, 144 to 233, but it's sjanderson233 on Instagram. I look forward to seeing you there, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of July. Talk soon. Peace to you. Bye-bye.